that all men have inalienable rights to think freely, to talk freely, to write freely their own opinions, and to counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others.
This is from the Creed of the Church of Scientology. Hey everybody, I'm Holly, aka the ScientoloGeek, and welcome to the 47th episode of Going Over the Data series. Now, we're going to be finishing the last 3 pages of the policy letter that I started over in video 45, and I'm just glad for it to be done. It doesn't look like any of the policies coming up are really going to be that much shorter, 4 pages, and then I think I saw one that was like 7. So, quite a few of these videos are going to be multi-parters. So if you like those, feel free. To be honest, I'm not looking forward to these, especially if they were as boring as this past one. I don't know what it was about this, but I couldn't do it. I zone out as I'm reading now, and the only time I really do a good review of it is when I am taking notes for the outro. But, I mean, if you guys want, share, like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, do what you gotta do, react, engage with my videos, make sure they're getting out to people. And without any further ado, let's dive in. So we left off at the change.
One more tip on this whole scene. If you can't find the why, you revert. I learned this about life out of plant research.
What, you mean doing auditing on tomatoes?
I found out that you went back to the point of major change in a greenhouse or a garden and corrected it the second you saw the plants dying. You required then a logging of everything that was done. If you had a log of everything that was done, you could get the date and the change. You knew the date they started to wilt, so what change was around the vicinity of that date. And you inevitably and invariably found a huge change had taken place, not a small one.
I doubt that. I already have an issue with that. Why are you assuming it's a huge change automatically? But then again, you're Hubbard, simplicity, that's just your whole thing.
And the tip is that if all else fails, why just go back to your major change, and you can do that by stats, go to major change, and so on. You won't always be right, but you're operating on a general why. There was a change. We suddenly failed to require something. Every once in a while, you really will be scattering around trying to find this. This works in almost all situations to some degree.
Almost. You're covering your ass considering that almost all situations means like very little, whereas the majority are not this simple.
This works in almost all situations to some degree, what change was there. But we scatter all over the place. It has a liability. It tends to wipe out improvements. If you go back to the point of high stuff all the time, all the time, all the time, you're pegging yourself into the same pattern where, as a matter of fact, there might have been some better patterns. There might have been a better why in there than just a change of pattern. New why. Once in a while, you'll have found a why and handled that, but find it keeps slipping out again. For example, an org having to be told to keep in its FP number 1. FP number 1 resulted from an evaluation of financial difficulties. That was a why at one time and has since become a standard action. But where you keep having to say to an area, get your FP number 1 in, now, why do you have to keep getting in FP number 1? The why is not that FP number 1 is out. We've gotten that in as a practiced action. Why does it keep sliding out in this area? There could be several things, actually. If you have to keep saying get in CS Series 25 so that you do have a DFP, so that people do come in and are invoiced and so forth, you're obviously running into a why of why something keeps sliding out. What's a recommendation? What is a recommendation? Actually, usually, it would be recommended if somebody else were going to execute it.
That's not a definition.
You have a recommended program, and then from a recommended program, you have an executed program. So at that moment, you shifted your hat. You're no longer an evaluator, you're an executor or an executive. If your evaluations that wind up in whys, that wind up in recommendations, are going to autonomously function, that is to say, singly and by itself function, without regard to any other entity or activity, the next thing you know, you're going to have 14 or 15 programs which are in direct collision, which will produce sufficient confusion to reduce the stats. Then you yourself will wonder if you found the right why because it didn't work, whereas the reason could be entirely different. The reason is your recommendation was in collision with other whys and recommendations, and so operated to block other actions which were vital to the continuous operation of an activity. You can kill your own recommendation. If you were in a position where you were going to independently of other evaluators execute all your actions, you might wind up with a mess. You've got your neck out as an evaluator. The essence of a recommendation is agreed upon, and after there is a recommendation, there is an agreed upon before there's execution. An agreed upon action means that you'd have to agree with other bodies of data which people had, not their personality, other bodies of data. If you have data which is contrary to an action which is being proposed, you could be put in a position of canceling or trying to cancel or recommending a cancellation of a senior's order. Therefore, one has to have agreed upon before execution.
That's just called review.
When you are collecting data, you have a torrent of data coming in. You are collecting data, collecting data, collecting data, collecting data. If that data is not evaluated, it is useless. It is just a useless expense. The only way that data is of any value at all is if evaluations are done on it. Any independent order given without the benefit of the other evaluations would be a risk. It isn't agreed upon person to person. It's agreed upon data to data. The only agreement would be on whether there's a situation or a no situation, a good situation or a bad situation, or a no situation.
Why'd you have to say that again?
There'd have to be agreement on that point, and there would have to be an agreement on the why. Only then could you get a coordinated recommendation. Evaluate. You've got to do evaluations. If you don't do evaluations, you'll be insufficiently informed to be a competent agreeer or disagreeer. You'll be insufficiently informed to be sufficiently efficient to get the show on the road.
Are you trying to just say the same stuff over and over again?
Take advantage of the tremendous volumes of data which come in by doing evaluations, provide a sufficient running record of any and all existing situations in your line of country so that there is a general view of what is going on so that the data can be looked at, looked up, and one is sufficiently informed so that he can make efficient judgments, and that will decrease the amount of work done on this and that doesn't really handle anything.
Dude, stop with the run-on sentences. This one took up 6 fucking lines. I am so sick of this, because then after a certain point, the sentences just start going in one ear, out the other, right over the head, and I don't even pay attention to them. I just kind of zone out and read at that point.
And it amounts to fewer orders which can then be enforced. It amounts to prosperity because one of the whys we find on occasion is that there are too many orders drifting around which haven't been executed. One winds up operating on somewhat of a jammed communication line, just jammed by volume.
This kind of sounds like Dev T.
The guy that's reading all this stuff is out there, and he's got noise, and he's got this, and they've got bill collectors, and he's got something else, and so on. He never has time to read it, he doesn't know what the situation is, and so forth. One could also, without proper evaluation, easily issue an order into an area with a hidden why, which would destroy it. One could also, without proper evaluation, easily issue an order into an area with a hidden why, which could destroy it. And the speed of action determines the degree of loss, and that is a rule. The speed of action also determines the degree of gain, and speed has a price. An organization which is not doing well, its why not accurately found for 8 months, is a loss for 8 months each succeeding week. If an organization should be making $15,000 and is only making $2,000, you're losing $13,000 a week every week that you don't handle it.
It's speed of gain or loss. Alright, so what did we cover today? We've learned that if the why isn't found, then it's possible that you could roll back to a point where these statistics began dropping and see what major change was implemented in order to cause those stats to go down. I don't know why he always assumes it's a major change. It almost seems like a non sequitur. But just roll back, see what happens, see if you can stop the negative change, and then see if your stats improve. This doesn't always work, he says, but it can ruin improvement. So you run the risk of messing stuff up by going back. He also talks about having a wrong why that keeps having to be implemented over and over again, but actually doesn't contribute to any kind of upward statistic. Again, this is just the wrong why section reread and recovered over and over again. Make sure your recommendations do not clash with other data or other areas in their functions. So obviously you want to review with other people before you do an evaluation or before you give any recommendation. Without evaluations, organizations suffer, and he's made this point plenty of times. Doesn't mean it's true. And how quickly you act can determine how quickly you can restabilize yourself, get better stats, get more income, more enrollment, whatever your statistic is, in order to mitigate your losses and speed up your process of gaining stuff again. So if you want access to any of these documents, the data series, the policies, tech, flag orders, base orders, any of the other miscellaneous documentation that I have on my Google Drive folder, feel free to email me at scientologeek@gmail.com, which is in the description, or go to the Discord server, link in the description as well, in order to be able to join the Discord server. Maybe hit me up, send me a valid Gmail from there if you want. But if you guys want to join, cool. If you don't, whatever. But it'd be nice to see you guys join there. It's a little dead, I'll admit. So a little bit of interaction would be kind of nice. And I will talk to all of you later. See ya.